All right, if you are just joining us here on Atlanta News First Plus, I just want to explain to you what you're looking at. You're looking at the seal inside of a South Carolina courtroom. We are awaiting the sentencing now of disgraced attorney Alec Murdaugh after he was convicted of killing his wife and son. Took a jury less than 3 hours of deliberations to convict 54-year-old Alec Murdaugh on 2 counts of murder and 2 counts of possession of a weapon during the commission of a violent crime. This is a story, of course, we've been following here on Atlanta News First Plus. As we reported to you yesterday, at the time their closing arguments were underway yesterday, and then jury instructions were read. There was a charge conference, and then it went to the jury. Really a stunning kind of timeline here. This jury has been hearing this case over the last 6 weeks now, and just kind of to get everyone up to speed on sort of how the timeline of the overall case has gone and what the background is. Prosecution called 61 witnesses, defense called 14. Prosecution called 6 rebuttal witnesses in this 6-week period of this trial. And as you see, we prepared these graphics just kind of pointing out some of the context here, that the Murdaugh family name has really dominated the legal landscape in coastal South Carolina for almost 90 years, with 3 generations holding powerful positions in the prosecutor's office there. And then the scandal, June of 2021, ultimately is when Alec Murdaugh pleaded not guilty to killing his wife and son. And then, you know, ultimately here we are, had this trial and this verdict. He did testify in his own defense during the course of this trial, admitted that he lied to police about where he was on the night of the murders, admitted to actually stealing money from clients and an opioid addiction. This is separate to the murder case. But he did admit to this, you know, during the course of this particular trial. And then there was a Snapchat video that was revealed during the course of this trial, which was actually taken by the victim, his son, Paul Murdaugh, at the family's dog kennels before he was killed, that changed everything according to prosecutors, because it actually put Alec Murdaugh at the scene of the crime, despite you know, his initial claim that he was not there on the night in question. Apologize, just having a little bit of technical difficulty here, trying to get this squared away. But so we are keeping our eye on this South Carolina courtroom right now, and as we kind of wait for the sentencing to begin, I'd like to bring in a special guest joining us here today. Criminal attorney Holly Waltman joining us. You know what? Let me adjust the cameras a little bit and show folks kind of the person that we're talking about. Holly, tell first of all our viewers a little bit about your background, just because I want them to get to know you, because I know you're really you really have a position of a lot of insight into all this.
Certainly. Well, good morning, everyone. Thanks for having me, Joy. I am a former prosecutor, criminal defense attorney, and former public defender here in Atlanta, Georgia, and all over the state. My specialty and kind of my expertise is in complex felonies, murder cases, capital cases that have extreme implications, such as this one right here. And I've been following this case for a couple weeks now closely. I know we all have, and really, I think I was just shocked at how fast this came back. You know, the jury definitely sent a message above and beyond guilty on every count by the speed in which they delivered their verdict.
I was really shocked. You know, and I kind of got to know you through Court TV, through your work at Court TV when I was working at Court TV. So we both followed a lot of trials. I mean, you live it very closely, and I did not anticipate a verdict coming down that quickly. 3 hours after 6 weeks of testimony. It's pretty remarkable. What does that mean about kind of the strength of the evidence here?
Yeah, so it definitely speaks to the strength of the evidence and something that's unique about jury trials and different than any other kind of legal proceeding that we have in the United States. There's no set way that the jury has to do this, right? There is not a procedure that they have to go back other than just take all the evidence back there, pick a foreperson to be in charge and sign the verdict form at the end of their deliberations. And really it just, I think we heard a little bit, I watched it last night, some of the jury members came out and spoke to some of the media and said, hey, we were almost unanimous from the get-go, right? It was only a few people that were just not certain on the first vote that they did. So it definitely speaks volume to the evidence. And also, you gotta remember, these are people that lived in this community alongside this family.
Yeah.
A lot of this family story was already known by them prior to their selection on this panel.
I wanted to ask you, because we know that Alec Murdaugh is embroiled in a lot of controversy and a lot of legal trouble beyond this particular murder case, which has now been adjudicated. His own law firm has sued him, accusing him of basically stealing clients' money and using it for his own personal gain. The family of his housekeeper sued him as well, and for those who may not know, that his housekeeper died of what was thought to be natural causes, but that's kind of under suspicion right now. And he was handling her estate, and so there were some issues around that. And then there were these charges as well that he, in an insurance fraud scheme where he allegedly hired a man to shoot him in order to collect insurance money. I mean, I guess at the time, the alleged plan was that he was going to have this man kill him so that his other surviving son could get the life insurance money. I mean, it's just like a made-for-TV movie, the facts of this case. So when you look at that, how does this verdict and this murder trial play into all of that?
I think we'll wait to see how Hollywood takes it, what direction it goes. It's either the most unfortunate series of events and most unlucky person in the world, or where there's smoke, there's probably a little bit of fire, right? I think that one of the interesting parts that I thought from the beginning of this trial was that neither the defense nor the state asked for it to be moved into a different jurisdiction. I thought that was an interesting call, a strategy call. Both of them were comfortable that they could get a clean and safe trial in the jurisdiction and in the venue that they tried the case.
Yeah, and just kind of looking at, I'm just kind of calling up this timeline here, just looking at some of the background, starting back in 2021, where the CFO of his law firm, you can see this, Holly, confronts him about $792,000 in missing funds. In 2020, June 7th, I guess it's that same day, he calls 911 reporting that he found his wife and son dead, claimed that he had been out visiting his ailing mom at the time. And a couple weeks later, June 15th, saying that you see SLED released some basic info about the killings as well. So I guess the claim here is that the theory here is that he basically killed his wife and son because of all of these financial problems that he wanted to cover up.
Well, and that's an important point, Joy. Motive here is a little bit unclear, but there certainly is a lot of meat and potatoes, if you will, that could go along with the why behind this case. Luckily for the state and for the prosecution, the why and the motive is not part of their case. They do not have to prove that, and it doesn't even have to really be alluded to. And honestly, I don't know that we'll ever get that, right? Why do people do things like this? We don't know. It is, to me, alarming that the case went so fast in the deliberations.
All rise. Court is now in session. Judge Newman presiding.
Sounds like there's some activity, getting underway here.
Be seated.
Good morning. Parties ready to proceed?
State's ready, Your Honor.
Bench is ready, Your Honor.
All right, from the state, Mr. Waters.
Thank you, Your Honor. We're obviously here in the sentencing for the state versus Richard Alexander Murdaugh. Your Honor, I have prepared the sentencing sheets signed up. If I can hand those up to the clerk. Your Honor, very quickly, the defendant has no prior record, and the state has no victim impact people who want to speak at this time. But I will address the court briefly. And I don't need, Your Honor, to repeat the evidence that Your Honor just heard for the past 6 weeks, but it is overwhelming, and it shows this man to be a cunning manipulator, a man who placed himself above all others, including his family. A man who violated the trust of so many, including his friends, his family, his partners, his profession, but most of all, Maggie and Paul. This is a very complicated situation, and I want to offer my condolences to the family that has suffered here. We have tried very hard to be respectful and sensitive regardless of what position any person took, because this family has suffered and they've had to suffer in the public eye. And I want to offer my condolences to this family. I want to offer it for Maggie and Paul and Mr. Randolph too, who I had the pleasure of working with on one occasion. But the reality remains is that despite all this attention, this case is about Maggie Murdaugh and Paul Murdaugh, and I'm so thankful that the jurors gave them a voice. You heard about Paul. Obviously there was the boat case, but you also heard him described as a fun-loving young man, a person who loved life, a person who would do anything for his friends, for anyone. And he was cut down as he was just starting to live his life. You heard about Maggie. You heard how sweet she was. You heard that she was a girl's girl who adapted to the outdoorsman life of her sons, how much she loved her sister and her brother-in-law and their children, and she was cut down in the prime of her life. Both of them, like everyone else, was unaware of who he really was. No one who thought they knew this man, no one who thought they were close to this man knew who he really was. And Your Honor, that's chilling. And I've looked in his eyes, and he liked to stare me down as he would walk by me during this trial. And I could see the real Alex Murdaugh when he looked at me. The depravity, the callousness, the selfishness of these crimes are stunning. The lack of remorse and the effortless way in which he lies, including here sitting right over there in this witness stand. Your Honor, a man like that, a man like this man, should never be allowed to be among free, law-abiding citizens again. And I would submit to you that the only just sentence here to give justice for Maggie and Paul is the maximum, and that would be 2 consecutive life sentences. Thank you, Your Honor.
You indicate that no victim would like to speak at this time. Would any victim like to speak at any time during these proceedings?
Your Honor, one of the things we did, and we did early on, obviously, as I just said, it's a very complicated situation, but we made the decision early on. We've had our victim advocate here who's been doing a wonderful job, regardless of the viewpoints of any individual family member, to provide aid and service to them, and we made that decision. I'm informed by our victim advocate that none of them wish to speak. The defense can certainly address that, but that's what I am informed. But they certainly were offered the opportunity as is required, and I want to commend our victim advocate on the excellent job she did in handling this complex situation that we wanted to be sensitive to, because again, none of us are not mindful of the fact of the suffering of this family.
I noticed Sled Chief Mark Keel is here. Would you like to address the court on any matters, Chief?
No, sir. Just to say, again, very proud of our agents, the work they've done, and proud of the partnership that we've had with the Attorney General's office as we've had for many years. And again, we're here to see that justice is served, and we believe it has been. Thank you.
Thank you. For the defense.
Your Honor, Mr. Griffin and I would have no comment. The defendant would like to address the court, though.
Mr. Murdaugh.
Good morning, Your Honor. I'm innocent. I would never hurt my wife, Maggie, and I would never hurt my son, Paw Paw.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. Sit down.
Yep.
Anything further?
I don't think further comment is necessary, Your Honor. Thank you.
Mr. Murdaugh, if you'll come before the court for sentencing. This has been perhaps one of the most troubling cases, not just for me as a judge, for the state, for the defense team, but for all of the citizens in this community, all the citizens in this state, and as we've seen based on the media coverage throughout the nation. You have a wife who's been killed, murdered, a son savagely murdered, a lawyer, a person from a respected family who has controlled justice in this community for over a century, a person whose grandfather's portrait hang at the back of the courthouse that I had to have ordered removed in order to ensure that a fair trial was had by both the state and the defense. And I've sat through the trial. Not only have I sat through the trial, but also as the presiding judge of the state grand jury, sat through and participated in the issuance of search warrants of various sorts, bond hearings, and have had to consider many things. And we have this case, and I'm also assigned to preside over 99 others, at least 99 other cases. Though testimony has come up regarding many of those other cases, I will not make any comment with regard to any other pending matter, as I have been assigned those cases as well. It's also particularly troubling, Mr. Murdaugh, because as a member of the legal community and a well-known member of the legal community, you've practiced law before me, and we've seen each other at various occasions throughout the years. And it was especially heartbreaking for me to see you go in the media from being a grieving father who lost a wife and a son to being the person indicted and convicted of killing them. and you've engaged in such duplicitous conduct here in the courtroom, here on the witness stand, and as established by the testimony throughout the time leading from the time of the indictment and prior to the indictment throughout the trial to this moment in time. Certainly, you have no obligation to say anything other than saying not guilty. And obviously, as appeals are probably expected or absolutely expected, I would not expect a confession of any kind. In fact, as I've presided over murder cases over the past 22 years, I have yet to find a defendant who could go there, who could go back to that moment in time when they decided to pull the trigger or to otherwise murder someone. I have not been able to get anyone, any defendant, even those who have confessed to being guilty, to go back and explain to me what happened at that moment in time when they opted to pull the trigger, when they opted to commit the most heinous crimes known to man. In this case, qualifies under our death penalty statute based on the statutory aggravating circumstances of 2 or more people being murdered by the defendant by one act or pursuant to one scheme or course of conduct. I don't question at all the decision of the state not to pursue the death penalty. But as I sit here in this courtroom and look around the many portraits of judges and other court officials and reflect on the fact that over the past century, your family, including you, have been prosecuting people here in this courtroom, and many have received the death penalty, probably for lesser conduct. Remind me of the expression you gave on the witness stand. Was it tangled?
Tangled web, we weave.
Oh, what tangled web we weave. What did you mean by that?
It meant when I lied, I continue to lie.
And the question is, when will it end? When will it end? And it's ended already for the jury because they've concluded that you continued to lie and lied throughout your testimony. And perhaps with all the throng of people here, they, for the most part, all believe, or 80, 90%, 99% believe that you continue to lie now when your statement of denial to the court. Perhaps you believe that it does not matter, that there's nothing that can mitigate a sentence given the crimes that were committed. You know, a notice of alibi was filed in this case by counsel in November, and we conducted a hearing, pretrial hearing, in which you claimed to have been someplace else at the time the crime was committed. Then, after all of the witnesses placed you at the scene of the crime, at the last minute, or last minutes or days, you switch courses and admitted to being there. And then that necessitated more lies and continued to lie. And I say, where will it end? It's already ended for many who have heard you and concluded that it'll never end. But within your own soul, you have to deal with that. And I know you have to see Paul and Maggie during the night times when you're attempting to go to sleep. I'm sure they come and visit you. I'm sure.
All day and every night.
Yeah, I'm sure. And they will continue to do so. And reflect on the last time they looked you in the eyes, as you looked the jury in the eyes. I don't know person who's always been such a gregarious, friendly person can cause your life to be tangled in such a weave, web, such a situation that yours have spun into. And it's so unfortunate because you had such a lovely family of such friendly people, including you, and to go from that to this. You know, your license to practice law has been stripped away from you. You turned from lawyer to witness, and now have an opportunity to make your final appeal as an ex-lawyer. And it's almost, it's really surprising that you're waiving this right at this time. And if you opt to do so, it's on you. You're not compelled to say anything. But you have the opportunity to do so.
Judge, I tell you again, I respect this court, but I'm innocent. I would never, under any circumstances, hurt my wife, Maggie, and I would never, under any circumstances, hurt my son, Paul.
Well, and it might not have been you. It might have been the monster you become when you take 15, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 opioid pills. Maybe you become another person. I've seen that before. The person standing before me was not the person who committed the crime, though it's the same individual. We'll leave that at that. Before announcing sentence on these cases, with regard to all of the other pending cases, are any of them here in Colleton, or I'm sure some of them are?
Yes, sir.
Half of them, or?
I don't have that in front of me, but there are a substantial number of charges here. There's some in Hampton, Orangeburg, Beaufort, Allendale. There may be others that I'm not thinking of right now.
We might have worn out our welcome here in Colleton.
Colleton's been great.
They have been, and I'll take this opportunity to thank Sheriff Hill and all of the court officials and really everyone I've met and dealt with while here in Colleton County. Just been great. But without any delay, we're going to schedule some of the other matters. I know Mr. Harpootlian's scheduling is complicated, and you've sacrificed quite a bit to be able to be here defending Mr. Murdaugh, as well as the Attorney General's office, with all the other many things and obligations you have. And to be able to have the Attorney General here, Alan Wilson, for the period of time that he's devoted to being here, along with everyone else, it's been quite a sacrifice. But there are other victims whose cases deserve to be heard. And this case has jumped some of those other cases, perhaps jumped it because of this case resulting in an assault on the integrity of the judicial system in our state, law enforcement in our state. Even during this trial, the law enforcement have been maligned for the past 5 or 6 weeks by one who had access to the wheels of justice, to be able to deflect the investigation. And as the evidence is pointed out in this case, the looming storm that Mr. Waters talked about, I can just imagine on that day, June 7th, when a lawyer is confronted and confesses to having stolen over $500,000 from a client, and he has a tiger like Mark Tinsley on his tail pursuing discovery in the case involving the death of Mallory Beach, and having a father, for the most part, on his deathbed. I could imagine, or really can't imagine, but I know it had to have been quite a bit going through your mind on that day. But amazingly, to have you come and testify that it was just another ordinary day, that my wife and son and I were out just enjoying life. Not credible, not believable. You can convince yourself about it, but obviously you have the inability to convince anyone else about that. So if you made any such arguments as a lawyer, you would lose every case like that. Cases you will never have an opportunity to argue anymore, except perhaps your own as you sit in the Department of Corrections. Anything further?
No, sir.
All right, Mr. Murdaugh, I sentence you to the State Department of Corrections on each of the murder indictments in the murder of your wife, Maggie Murdaugh. I sentence you for a term of the rest of your natural life for the murder of Paul Murdaugh, whom you probably loved so much. I sentence you to prison for murdering him for the rest of your natural life. Those sentences will run consecutive. Under the statute involving possession of a weapon during a violent crime, there is no sentence where a life sentence is imposed on other indictments. That is the sentence of the court, and you are remanded to the State Department of Corrections. and officers may carry forth on the imposition. Yes, sir.
May we approach?
Yes, sir.
All right, so you've just been watching live as disgraced South Carolina attorney Alec Murdaugh has been sentenced to life in prison for the killing of his wife and his son. His wife Maggie, 52 years old, son Paul, 22 years old, and this Alec Murdaugh, comes from a very prominent legal dynasty, really. For some 90 years, his family has held powerful positions in the prosecutor's office there. We even heard the judge allude to that, right? Bringing in Holly Waltman, attorney here in the Atlanta metro area. You heard the judge address that, right?
Right, Joy. That was kind of shocking, right? They had to remove a picture of one of his relatives from the courthouse to keep the neutrality of the court and of the bench. And that really speaks to kind of maybe why the jury did this so fast. They all knew this family. This is not a new story for them. They know all of the other troubles that he's been in as well. And I also found it really surprising that he spoke again, yet again, right? And the judge, and this defendant more so than any really knows that you have the absolute right to remain silent as a defendant.
Before we adjourn,
Here he goes again.
an order was issued concerning maintaining the juror's identity being anonymous. That order was issued, and for the most part it's been complied with, except for the jury leaving the courtroom yesterday, or not the jury, but the defendant leaving the courtroom while the jury is still seated. Protecting the identity of the jurors is certainly extremely important during the course of a trial to ensure that no one makes contact with the jury or attempts to influence the jury. Jurors have a right to continue that privacy beyond their jury service, but they're not obligated to do so. And it would not surprise me if jurors choose to come forward and to speak, and they're encouraged to do so if that is their desire. I have no problem whatsoever with the jurors unmasking themselves and speaking freely with the media, because they have undergone a life-changing experience as it relates to many of them. And some of them are here now, and I want them to know that should anyone attempt to harass them or annoy them, please let me know and I will address the issue. Secondly, there's a complaint now regarding the posting of autopsy photographs or photos that came from within the courtroom. It's based on the direction of the photographs. It did not come from the audience, came somehow from within the well of the court. The parties have requested an investigation of that. I have my hands full doing my job, and I don't attempt to conduct any investigations beyond the conducting of a trial, but to the extent that law enforcement decides to review that, that will be the responsibility of law enforcement. Yes. And of course, one of the reasons we've sought to seal graphic photos is because the parties have a right to privacy and a right to those matters not being publicly disclosed. If anyone has heard about the recent settlement that Kobe Bryant's, another sports analogy, Kobe Bryant's wife just made with Los Angeles County and others out there over certain disclosures of information involving the death of Kobe Bryant, liability can be substantial, and it's a risk for the most part that's not worth taking. So we'll let everyone judge themselves accordingly with that regard. Aside from all that, our business is done here in Colleton County, and I get to use my gavel one or few times during this trial and order that court be adjourned. Sine die.
All rise.
All right, so you have just been watching live as Disgraced South Carolina attorney, now disbarred, Alec Murdaugh, has now been convicted and sentenced to life in prison for murdering his own wife, 52-year-old Maggie, and his own son, 22-year-old Paul, on the family's estate in coastal South Carolina. I've had with me this morning our special guest analyst, Holly Waltman, who's an attorney right here in the metro Atlanta area. Holly, I mean, it's just incredible, the speed at which we got this verdict and then the sentencing happening just the very next morning. I mean, the jury decided in less than 3 hours after hearing 6 weeks of testimony.
And countless witnesses, that's right, Joy. We have a judge who said late last evening, we're going to take a break, we're going to recess, and then tomorrow morning, fresh and early, we're going to do this sentencing. I kind of was shocked by that. I thought that the defense might then say, hey, we need a couple days to get some stuff ready, perhaps even prepare their client, remind him, not that he needs to be reminded, that you have the absolute right to remain silent. And yet we still saw the back and forth between him and the judge and some remarks from the judge before he adjourned to court.
Yeah, you know, we've been talking a lot about just the context here that has really kind of captured a lot of fascination around the country with this trial because, and I'm going to just call up some of this background for our viewers. You know, Alec Murdaugh is part of a very prominent legal dynasty in South Carolina. His family for generations has really kind of dominated the legal landscape, 87 years, and they've held positions in the prosecutor's office. We heard the judge say he actually had to have a portrait of this defendant's grandfather removed just so that it doesn't bias the jury in this case. In June of 2021, he pleaded not guilty to killing his wife and son. And during the course of this trial, again, we heard from numerous witnesses, 61 witnesses for the state, 14 for the defense, 6 rebuttal witnesses. So I'm not good at math, that's what, 80 witnesses, Holly? Something like that? I mean, they've heard a mountain of evidence on each side. And Murdaugh did testify in his own defense. He admitted that he actually initially lied to police about where he was on the night of the murders. He had claimed at the time that he was visiting his ailing mom. And he also admitted to stealing money from clients and having an opioid addiction. But he had to finally admit that he did lie because there was a Snapchat video that was taken by Paul Murdaugh, again, the victim, his own son, at the family's dog kennels before he was killed that, quote, changed everything according to prosecutors because it put him there at the scene of the crime, at the time of the crime, I should say, as well. So I guess, you know, when you look at the circumstances here, maybe that's why it took the jury just 3 hours.
For me, that Snapchat video was really, really important, right? To come in and say, hey, I was not honest with the police when you were just involved in losing a massive amount of your family is, I'm not going to say it's easily explainable, but it makes a little bit more sense, right? So to come in and testify in your own defense and then admit that you've at least lied once puts his credibility right under the spotlight, right under a microscope. And this Snapchat video did not back up his second attempt at trying to be honest with the jury.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So the sentence here for this, again, I mean, this is an attorney. He was disbarred, but I mean, not just any attorney, very prominent attorney from a legal dynasty. He's been sentenced to life in prison. And just kind of looking at kind of what the options were on the table here. So the death penalty is still allowed technically under South Carolina law, but there's trouble getting kind of the lethal injection drugs. This has been kind of a nationwide issue. So in reality, they haven't happened for many years in South Carolina. Why do you think that wasn't sought in this case? Is it because pragmatically they knew that the prosecutors knew the death penalty wouldn't realistically happen?
So that's a good question, and I think a lot of it has to do with how the state felt about their case, right? When you put something as strong and as big, I mean, there is nothing bigger than the death penalty option at sentencing. And when you put something like that in play, there are so many more checks and balances. These sort of cases can drag out much longer in length and take up resources from the court. It is not something that I'm aware that South Carolina regularly does in execution. I think it's been many, many years since that's happened. And so for me, I think, for the state in this case, it just made more sense to just ask for life without parole. And that's what they got.
So in reality, if the state wanted to punish someone to the max, and in reality they could pursue the death penalty, but the actual fact is that then there would be several appeals. It would open up this whole appeals process, right? So it's just kind of cleaner, if you will, to just do what they did and just ask for life in prison. Is that
certainly? And that's certainly one way to think about it. It's kind of how I think about it. Not being a proponent of the death penalty myself, I do think that it's just a cleaner trial when you're asking just the judge to impose the maximum sentence here. And I think that the jury sent that message to the judge, who accurately gave us our verdict, our sentence just a moment ago.
I want to just kind of bring up for our viewers some of this other context. Look at this timeline, because this isn't just murder charge. Well, now conviction that this Alec Murdaugh is facing. His own law firm. I'm pulled up this timeline, so it's in chronological order. We got a lot of elements here, but his law firm confronted him about $792,000 in missing funds. And they're actually now suing him over this, and that's one of the kind of clouds over his life and career right now. Also in June of 2021, SLED, the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division, also reopened their investigation into the unsolved death of Stephen Smith, and apparently, this Stephen Smith was found dead on a road in Hampton County, and based on information gathered while investigating the Murdaugh murders here, the investigation into Stephen Smith's death was reopened. So the question is, is Alec Murdaugh responsible for killing Stephen Smith? And it's interesting, this kind of attempted cover-up. Also in June of 2021, Alec Murdaugh himself and his surviving son announced a $100,000 reward for information leading to the arrest of whoever killed his wife and son, which now a jury has said he killed his wife and son. And SLED then released that redacted audio of his 911 call where, remember, he called 911 after his wife and son were killed, and he claimed that he found them there after, he had been out visiting his ailing mom. He just found them there, dead on the family's estate. He resigned from his law firm, after the accusations from his colleagues. And then it's very strange. Look, September also of 2021, he calls 911, reports that he was shot on a road. And then, if we fast forward down the line, because the timeline is very complicated, at some point, an investigation is launched and charges are filed related to that 911 call claiming that he was shot on the road, because the accusation is that he actually hired a man to kill him. That Alec Murdaugh allegedly hired a man to kill him so that his surviving son could collect life insurance. So now he's facing these insurance fraud accusations as well. And then, there was the death of the housekeeper, Gloria Satterfield, as well, and the suit from her family about how her estate was handled and so forth, and certainly some questions about who killed Gloria Satterfield. Did she actually die of natural causes?
It is a long, long, laundry list of unfortunate events or coincidences, right? We have here, which I don't think this is the last time that we're going to see this individual in a courtroom, even outside of his appeal. I think that there are many other things coming down the line that are going to bring him back that he's going to have to answer for.
So how does this, because this is the most serious, this is as bad as it gets, killing your wife and son. These other charges obviously very, very serious, but it really doesn't get any worse than being convicted of murdering your own family. That said, how is this conviction and this sentencing going to impact, these other accusations of money laundering, insurance fraud, stealing money from clients in his own law firm? What happens with those?
So, murder cases are unlike any other big felony cases where there's no real winners. And we saw that today here. The victims' families, they declined to even make comment, right? They have that right under the victim's bill. They have that ability to come and look at the person that has been found convicted of murdering their loved one in the face, and they chose not to. So everyone walks away feeling lost from a murder case, no matter if it's someone who's very famous or just a normal, regular person that nobody knows their name, right? Mm-hmm. How this will affect other more civil suits in nature is yet to be determined. If there is still resources available, I know that this legal team that he put together, I don't believe they did this pro bono. I do think that they were retained. There were many, many experts and witnesses that reviewed records, and it really was a team, effort on both sides. And depending on what sort of resources the Murdaugh family still has, will determine the outcome of some of these civil cases.
Yeah. I would imagine. So certainly a lot of controversy there. What else do you think should be anticipated moving forward? Any appealable issues? Do you think there's a chance for appeal here?
Certainly. When you have a trial of this magnitude that lasts this long, this many evidentiary decisions were made by the judge, this many strategic decisions were made by both the state and the defense, an appeals attorney will be beginning the process of reviewing this through a transcript that's being prepared probably right now. And of course there will be an appeal. There is a very short window of time for Mr. Murdaugh to file that appeal to make sure that it is timely and that it is done within the laws and parameters of the South Carolina law. I do think that we will see many things appealed, not only some of the judge's decisions, but some of the strategic decisions that both the legal teams made throughout the trial.
Yeah, right, absolutely. Yeah, it's pretty stunning.
And it's far from done, right? We're definitely going to see a lot more coming down the line in this case. Once the appeals attorneys start looking at the transcript, start looking at some of the decisions and some of the evidence that was perhaps not allowed to be discussed or to be discussed. Because remember, some of this stuff outside of the murder allegations from other cases and lawsuits that he had been facing and wrongful death suits that have been alleged against him, and those things are going to also be reviewed, because the jury might have had that in their mind when considering things that were just criminal elements of this case.
Yeah, and just kind of popping up this live look here appears to be the courthouse where this sentencing actually took place. But
I think here what we'll see, Joy, is the state come out and maybe comment or allude to maybe some of the family's feelings about the sentence and what the judge has just done. I don't know that we'll hear from the defense. We might, and then they might even be able to give us some sort of indication on if they do plan to appeal this decision that the jury has made.
So what would be potentially appealable issues? If they were looking for, of course, as a criminal defense attorney, you'd want to appeal if your client is convicted, but you have to find the grounds to do so. Was there anything that the state or the court mishandled that would kind of give rise to grounds for an appeal?
You know, certainly it's going to be reviewed and looked over very, very closely, right? Even before the trial begins, there are things that are decided pre-trial, right? Pre-trial motions or motions in limine, things that are decided. And it's basically one of the parties, the state and the defense, both had many pre-trial motions in this case. And they essentially went into the judge and said, hey, we want some clarification. What is going to be off limits? What is going to be allowed? What are we going to be able to get into, especially the state wanting to get into some of his background, some of the other things that have happened outside of the date in question of these murders. And so even before the trial has begun, there are things that an appeals attorney is going to look at very closely.
Yeah. So if you're prosecutors in this case, certainly this is a major victory, right? But what comes next? I mean, are they concerned about the possibility of appeal?
I think they know it's going to come down. Everyone that was on the state's team is a very seasoned trial attorney. It is almost guaranteed that an appeal will be filed, right? And you do that just to save someone's rights and preserve them, because it has to be done in such a tight, timely fashion. Okay, now will they be meritful points that on the appeal? That'll be yet to be seen. One of the things I thought was interesting was that we had this case in this community, and both sides came together and agreed to that.
Yeah.
If I would have been part of the defense team, I think I would have at least considered, hey, should we move this somewhere else? Somewhere where this family is not as well known.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much. Holly Waltman joining us, local Metro Atlanta attorney, and I know you're a former prosecutor as well, so we really appreciate you bringing that background and that analysis to all this. You know, I just want to let our viewers know that we have kind of just been keeping an eye on the skies as well. This is for tomorrow, but we have not so nice weather coming today. It's actually kind of a first alert weather day, so we're going to keep monitoring the conditions in the sky as well, and you know, keep it here on our digital platforms and also on air, because as we continue to track that severe weather, you're going to want to watch for any updates, and of course we're going to let you know if there is something that you need to be concerned about in your area. But thanks so much for joining us here on Atlanta News First and Atlanta News First Plus.